Devastating news for Donald Trump is music to my ears, and we got some music playing for you folks.
Ooh.
A New York State court judge has granted a preliminary injunction requested by the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, against Donald Trump and the Trump Organization, requiring an independent financial monitor be hired to review all of Trump's financial representations on a going forward basis. That's a disaster for Donald Trump. Trump is spiraling even more out of control as he filed a frivolous and truly incoherent lawsuit against the New York Attorney General Letitia James in Florida State Court, which looks like the rantings and ravings of a madman. Desperate, Donnie. The DOJ, meanwhile, grants Kash Patel something called use immunity to compel him to testify against Donald Trump in the criminal investigation relating to Trump's theft of thousands of government records, including documents that are among the highest level of top secret classified documents in this country. Trump calls for Mitch McConnell's impeachment. You know, just another day. Just calls for
casual
impeachment. The media doesn't care. We'll talk about it here on the Midas Touch podcast. And early vote numbers are strong for Democrats, like very strong. If Democrats keep turning out, we will win. And our guest tonight, the House Majority Whip, a legend, Congressman Jim Clyburn, joins us on the Midas Touch podcast.
Is booking these guests? Today. Oh my gosh.
Jordy. Who is booking these guests? Pretty unbelievable. Yes,
Brothers.
Ben, I feel like so much news just dropped right before we went live with the pod. So I know this podcast is basically going to be me and Jordy going, Ben, what does this mean? Ben, what does that mean? And I'm totally okay with that because our audience is about to get some truth bombs because, oh boy, what a list of things that you just read. But I'm so excited for the show. We had such an incredible conversation with the House Majority Whip. I'm so excited for everybody here to listen. Jordy, incredible job on that booking, getting a legend House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, on the show. I mean, it's pretty absolutely incredible. Such an honor to speak with him, such an honor to have him. And I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited seeing all the numbers coming out. I hope everybody had the opportunity to check out our recent interview with Simon Rosenberg, the Democratic strategist, who is going over all the target early numbers. We've been speaking about all of his data on the show, and we're going to dig into that data, not poll data, but actual data of physical people showing up at the polls and voting for Democrats. It's all looking very promising, but like Ben said, we got to keep it up every single day. We need to be working hard right now. There's only a few days left to save our democracy, so let's do this.
We post on YouTube yet the video with our interview on the data? Because people could go and check that out if we posted it.
Yes, we posted it actually like about... It's about 1 hour ago. We posted it on our YouTube channel. So head on over to our YouTube channel after the show. Watch the show. Listen to the show.
And then check that out.
Thanks for clarifying, brothers.
And then check that out for sure. Okay. So New York State Judge Arthur Engoron grants this preliminary injunction. Let me read you the sexiest parts of his ruling.
Because should I play such sexy parts in these injunctions?
I should have, if you prepared me, I would have played some sexy music, but now I got nothing.
This is what Engoron says in his order. There was oral argument today, and like Engoron, who, by the way, this judge from New York, who Trump was threatening last week, he called him a communist and said all these other things about Engoron. Engoron was toying with his lawyers at court today. He's like, maybe I should appoint Judge Raymond Dearie as the independent monitor, who's the special master who doesn't like Trump. And I guess that's an inside law joke by me.
He made a Raymond Dearie joke in court.
He made a Raymond Dearie joke about the special master who got appointed in
the such an FU to Trump. It's such an FU. Oh my
but here's what he said. This is what he goes in his order. He goes, in the absence of an injunction and given Trump's demonstrated propensity to engage in persistent fraud, failure to grant such an injunction could result in extreme prejudice to the people of New York. How about that statement in order? Ready? How about this too? Furthermore, given the persistent misrepresentations throughout every one of Mr. Trump's statement of financial conditions between 2011 to 2021, this court finds that the appointment of an independent monitor is the most prudent and narrowly tailored mechanism to ensure there is no fraud or illegality. And what you had, folks, is New York Attorney General Letitia James putting forward all of these affidavits with very specific facts showing an appraiser appraised the property at, let's say, this was one example of some apartments that Trump claims he owns, $750,000. What did Trump put in his statement of financial condition? Anybody want to guess? Appraiser, $750,000. What did Trump say? $50 million.
Come on.
For these $750,000.
Close.
Yeah, right. And regarding all the other properties, basically the same thing for Trump's triplex in New York in Trump Tower, the most expensive real estate in all of New York at that time was somewhere in the range of like $100 million for an apartment. What did Trump appraise his triplex for? Well, first, he claimed that an 11,000 square foot triplex was actually 33,000 square feet, which was just completely false. But then he said it was somewhere in the range of $350 million, which was like $270 million more than like what it should actually be appraised at, but also like $300 million more than like the highest appraised apartment in all of New York at that time. And so what the judge said is, look, New York Attorney General Tish James showed he engaged in this fraud, showed that he's engaged in ongoing fraud, and Donald Trump was asked questions in a special proceeding under oath. And the judge quoted the questions he was asked. Well, Donald Trump, you put in your financial condition documents, your statement of financial conditions, this valuation. Was that accurate? What did Trump respond, Brett and Jordy? I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. Each and every question that he was at, he pled the fifth. He did not offer, and the judge says this in the order, literally a quote, not a single iota of evidence to rebut the showing by the New York Attorney General that there was a probability of success on the merits, that she would prevail in the lawsuit, that he was engaged in this massive fraud from 2010, 2011 to the president. And by the way, it obviously dates back longer. That's as long as you can go actually file for. And so the judge made the finding, granted the preliminary injunction. And folks, this is a devastating order for Trump. I said this was going to happen, but for Donald Trump, appointing an independent monitor who will be literally placed in the Trump organization, appointed by the judge, who is now empowered to ask Trump and get all of his financials, any financial representation made to third parties, any financial representation made to lenders, all of Trump's financial dealings, all of his statements of financial condition. This independent monitor gets to look at it, and if there's anything off, runs right to court for emergency applications and to call it out. Like, Trump would rather pay $100 million than have this, because he can't engage.
He can't hide. He hide now. His back's against the wall. There's literally nothing he could do. So ironically, Ben, is this kind of like a special master in a certain way? It sounds like a little similar at the process, which is ironic.
It is the ultimate irony, Brett, that Trump sought this independent third party thing in the Southern District of Florida proceedings before Eileen Cannon, and she intervened, asserted equitable jurisdiction. By the way, all these other federal judges, if you notice, when all these other Trump lackeys like Lindell and others filed these things trying to invoke equitable jurisdiction, all these federal judges have put like footnotes, like basically just completely shading Judge Eileen Cannon. Like, it is beyond the most basic fundamental concept of law.
The footnotes are the best part. Yeah, when you read the filings, because we'll post the filings when we post the Ben videos of the breakdowns. When you read the filings, don't just read. I know sometimes when you get a book and you see that there are like little footnotes on the bottom of the book, you're like, not important. I'll just skip to the next page. Read the footnotes, because they are incredibly revealing in this case.
The footnotes are where the judges throw shade. So they'll be like, whereas pursuant to the footnote 2, basically like, F this guy. Like, that's what they do. But anyway, The special master is appointed by Judge Eileen Cannon to oversee executive privilege claims. Like that's not where special masters, but that should be appointed. But the same concept of an independent person looking over things. But here, an independent monitor to be appointed where there is this financial impropriety is actually where you do it. A step further that New York Attorney General could have gone is asked for a receivership. But that's the next step. A receiver actually takes over the business when it's being conducted for a fraudulent purpose.
Can you imagine his reaction to that?
But that's one of the things that Trump and his lawyers kept on arguing in court. They kept on saying that this was a receiver. And the judge says, no, this isn't a receiver yet. This is an independent monitor. But such a good ruling. Brett, you had finger up.
A finger up. This is what you got to do to get attention here. I wanted to bring up the fact that, well, just a week ago or about 6 days ago, Donald Trump actually took it upon himself to attack this judge. He went right after Justice Engoron, this judge who signed off on the preliminary injunction. And what did he say here? I'm trying to read it. The only person who may be worse than weak on violent crime, AG Letitia Peekaboo James. What a douche this guy is the judge we have on her ridiculous and highly partisan case against me and his family. His name is Arthur Engoron, and he is a vicious, biased, and mean rubber stamp for the communist takeover of the great and prosperous American company that I have built over a long period of years. He was appointed by my worst enemies. Case was to go to a new judge, but he demands to keep it. I have no jury or civil rights. I think it goes without saying, probably not the best idea to attack the judge who is making rulings on you generally. So, of course, how did Donald Trump then react to this ruling by Justice Engoron? He must have taken it in stride, right? Yes, Your Honor. I understand, Your Honor, right? Is that what he said?
Yeah, you would think that would be consistent with all of the other conduct that he had, very diplomatic. But no, his deranged statement was, a puppet judge of the New York Attorney General and other sworn enemies of President Trump and the Republican Party has just issued a ruling never before seen anywhere in America. It is communism come to our shores. Businesses will be fleeing New York, which they already are, for other states and other countries. Today's ridiculous ruling by a politically motivated handpicked judge makes it even more vital for courts in both New York and Florida to do the right thing and stop this inquisition. We have to fight back against radical tyranny and save our country. I mean, what a complete, utter baby. By the way, receiverships happen literally all the time when there are criminal corporations engaged in criminal conduct where a receiver comes in. By the way, the Trump Organization is on criminal trial nearby in Manhattan State Court before another judge. It got delayed because Trump's controller got COVID and started like coughing all over the judge. Like,
I read that story. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it said like he was coughing, hocking up a lung, like all during the morning.
And then he tested at lunch, and then they found out that he had it. Oh,
real, yeah. But in addition to Trump losing there, Trump is spiraling ever more, and he filed this lawsuit against Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, in Florida, in state court, Florida. I genuinely don't know what he is actually saying in this lawsuit. I did a decent job trying to break it down because it appears what he's actually asking for is he doesn't want to turn over in the New York case documents relating to his revocable trust and doesn't want to have any intervention by the New York Attorney General. But you have to get down to paragraph 119 and literally listen to these read these ranting and ravings of a lunatic where he's like, and everybody knows that Donald Trump is the greatest businessman ever and that Donald Trump knows everything about business and Donald Trump is the greatest. I'm like, what the hell are you even alleging? And Letitia James is a communist agent of the deep state and Antifa, and she needs to be taught a lesson by this court. I'm like, yo, what in the world is even the allegation? Like, what are you alleging? What is your basis to sue a New York Attorney General who is pursuing a civil lawsuit under a New York executive law?
I mean, Ben, he operates like a 5-year-old, so it's like, and no offense to 5-year-olds, but it's, oh, you're suing me, I'll sue you. Like that's
isn't this also kind of part of the Trump system? Ben, isn't this also part of this ongoing Trump system of just flooding the court with BS court cases that they have to hear?
Well, he knew he was going to lose the preliminary injunction hearing today. And so what he needs to do to grift off of his followers, knowing that he was going to have that bad news,
Right.
and he knew he was going to lose because he pled the fifth, because he's a complete freaking coward and a criminal. So he knew he was going to lose. But now he tells his followers, who he grifts on, I filed this lawsuit in Florida. And then if he loses, he just says it's the courts, and then the judge is a deep state agent against whatever. Only Donald Trump is right. Everybody else, the scientists, the lawyers, the judges, the experts, the actual business people, the actual people who know, he's the only one who has been wrong. Every single thing this idiot has done his entire life, he's bankrupted everything. His whole history is fraud, being sued, and losing.
He's a failure. He's Fred's failure.
This MAGA cult that he has the answers. So crazy.
I mean, the frustrating thing is we're finding out kind of along all industries, and from people running Twitter right now to people in the music industry to Donald Trump, people in politics, that it seems like the bigger the asshole you are and the worse at things that you are, the more a very core group of people seem to like you and defend you every step of the way. And the move is you just don't apologize. You just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, they go, he's not backing down. And that's kind of what the culture of our politics and just our culture in general in this country has become. And it's so damaging. It is just so damaging out there. But what I want to ask you, Ben, is there a way?
Ask Ben.
Well, he's the one who knows about courts. I would ask you, Jordy.
No. I'm being sincere. Ask Ben. Don't ask me. I'm not going to be able to answer your question.
Unless you want to take this, Jordy, I'll leave it to you. Is there a way to stop these frivolous lawsuits from happening over and over and over again? I know in some states they have like anti-SLAPP laws. I know we saw recently with the Hillary Clinton seeking sanctions against the Trump attorney over their failed conspiracy suit. But how could he just get away with constantly, like Jordy said, flooding the zone with endless frivolous cases over and over and over?
There is a situation where someone can be declared by a court as a vexatious litigant. And there are some situations where vexatious.
This is a very sexy episode.
Hold on.
Vexatious litigant.
Are you looking up the definition of vexatious?
No, good. Keep going, Ben, please. Explain.
There are situations where a litigant who goes pro per, meaning on their own, doing it solo, and doing it solo over and over and over again.
They never should have showed me this feature.
Filing big, nasty lawsuits with no legal rationale.
Vexatious.
Okay, we can do
it.
But the idea of we have been canceled. But a vexatious litigant is someone who files like lawsuits repeatedly. It's usually like a pro per person who will like always just file like these crazy lawsuits over and over and over again, and they keep on losing. And then someone goes, okay, this is a vexatious litigant. They can't file lawsuits anymore. Like Trump's lawsuits are that frivolous that it is essentially on that basis. I wonder if someone will actually bring a vexatious litigant claim against him. It would be hard to prevail because unfortunately he was elected president of the United States, which is like the hardest part of this all, which is why please vote, and make sure people vote and make sure everybody is going to the polls, because unfortunately our constitutional structure and everything that we have and hold dear in our legal system has viewed the greatest deference to that position of the executive office. And they say that no one is above the law, but the president's powers are, significant. And that is, because it was always viewed from the days of George Washington to the current that you wouldn't have just a total criminal lunatic, conspiracy theorist in that position. And we've had some bad presidents, and we've had some presidents close, but nothing like this. And so I don't think he'll be declared a vexatious litigant, but he's going to lose this case in Florida, and he is facing over $1 million in sanctions brought by Hillary Clinton and a number of other people who he and Alina Habba sued for civil racketeering and conspiracy back in March of this year. They got that case dismissed. And upon getting dismissed, the judge was like, this case is so frivolous, I'm retaining jurisdiction for sanctions. Invitation accepted. Hillary Clinton and like 9 other people who were sued filed it, over $1 million. And Alina Habba is already on TV saying that, Donald Trump said I shouldn't have filed the lawsuit, or, she's trying to cover for him. But she's going to be the one ultimately who holds the bag. So I hope Trump is paying her over $1 million.
And he's not. He's not. No,
actually, I don't hope that. I hope that they, and by the way, that judge too is going to grant those sanctions. Like you can see based on the rulings, people like, Ben, you're great at predicting these things. Like, how do you know? Like, because I read the documents and I see what the judges are saying, and I could if I could predict other things in life the same way I could predict the court cases, it's because a lot of lawyers who go on TV and do the shows and are other lawyers out there, they don't read the filings. They just like speak from emotions. And what I was told, that the best quality of being a lawyer, having a hard ass, meaning literally just sitting in your seat and reading a document until your ass becomes so hard because you've just read all of the documents. There's no substitute for the hard work and doing the reading. You're doing that because I did hard ass.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. It vexatious, hard ass.
All right, but we don't play sexy music for Kash Patel.
No.
Although use immunity is kind of sexy now that I think about it.
We might have to play horror. We might have to play horror music for Kash Patel.
Derivative use immunity time. So the Department of Justice granted Kash Patel what's called derivative use immunity after he was previously called to testify on October 13th regarding the documents that Donald Trump stole at Mar-a-Lago. But when he testified on October 13th, I plead the fifth. Yet Kash Patel spoke to Breitbart on May 5th, and he was like, yeah, man. So like on like, this is what he said. You're doing it as I do the impression. He was like, yeah. So I was in the room when Donald Trump declassified all of these documents about Russia and all these other documents relating to our national security interest. I was there. I saw it happen. So he said all of those things to Breitbart. He was actually the person who was appointed by Trump to deal with the National Archives after Trump left. And so one of the things that I did a video on when I read that Breitbart article that not a lot of people were talking about then, not saying the DOJ watched my video, but I'm saying they may have.
Not saying that either,
that video really talks about intent, and that Donald Trump clearly had the intent if he was specifically stealing documents relating to Russia. I'm like, holy crap.
He just said it out
saying
loud.
He stole documents related to Russia. It's in here in Breitbart. I'm like, no one's talking about this. Like, can we ask him about that, please? And they did, and he pled the fifth. So now they granted him what's called use immunity, which is different than transactional immunity. And use immunity just means that all of his testimony that he gives, he's immunized. They can't charge him based on what he testifies before the grand jury. And he can't be prosecuted for what is derived from it, derivative use immunity. So if they learn something from him there that they don't get independently, they can't prosecute him for that. But if they have an independent source that shows that he did criminal conduct, I don't know, like he spoke to Breitbart and admitted to the crimes on May 4th or 5th, they can prosecute him for that. That's different than transactional immunity, which is just giving him immunity for the overall crime in response for his testimony. So he could actually still be charged. Also, people go, well, what if he lies? He can be charged with perjury if he lies, even if he's given derivative use immunity or transactional immunity. There you have it.
There you have it. That's why I was calling the timeout before. I was getting worried that you weren't going to explain the different types of immunity. I thought you were going to just, so high level it. But I'm glad you really
I did it. I did it in 2 minutes. Brett, you want to talk about this Mitch McConnell thing? I did a lot of legal. So what? Okay, what does this mean with Kash Patel? What this means is he's going to testify soon. He's going to be compelled to testify. It shows that the Department of Justice is very serious about criminally prosecuting Trump. This is an aggressive move. We've also heard that the DOJ, this is just breaking right now, that the DOJ may be considering bringing on a special prosecutor as well to prosecute Trump after the midterms. Like, if you want to know how recent it broke, like literally as we are doing this, exclusive from CNN Politics, DOJ mulling potential special counsel if Trump runs in 2024. I just don't get to how CNN can do such a good report like this and then have its opinion people now just be so horrible and just be total MAGA. Like, you know that he engaged in this conduct based on your investigative team, which who knows how long they'll stay at CNN. But then your opinion people have the weirdest.
Yeah, I mean, is that a rhetorical question there, Ben, or can I answer and then I answer and then you say, Jordan, of course that was rhetorical. Why would you answer that question?
No, answer it. Then I want
gives them
Brett to
clicks.
talk about
It
Mitch
gives,
McConnell.
it gives them clicks and it allows them to speak to both sides every issue. It allows them to be right and wrong at the same time and both have their paper in the mainstream media, have their articles in the mainstream media and always be talked about because they're trying to fulfill both bases. They're playing both sides.
Here's the thing too. It's like they have some
point,
really good,
Thanks,
all these organizations have some really, 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 really good reporters, really good journalists who do really, really good and important investigative work. But when these executives now are looking at their TV networks, and we know because we've, talked to a lot of people about this issue, a lot of people in the industry and stuff, every time they try to diagnose the issues, they come to the wrong conclusion. They come to the conclusion that people want to hear both sides of every issue. And that's the problem with news. There's not enough balance. But like I've always said, you can't have balance between truth and lies. I mean, the things that are coming out of the right-wing side, it's not just a different belief or a different perspective. That is straight up conspiracy theories. So if you try to balance those two things, as I've said before, they don't balance. They're not. That's why when they say, oh, our country, it's so polarized, America, the United States, it's such a polarized country. I go, but is it though? Is it really? Because what I see is there's a pro-democracy, pro-normal faction of people that live on one plane. And when you think of poles, you think of two edges, right? You think of the two poles. But these people on the right now aren't even on the same line. They're somewhere all the way out here. You don't even know what they're talking about. They're coming. You're talking about a domestic terrorist attack on the husband of the Speaker of the House, and they go, "It's a gay lover," and you go, "What are you even talking about?" They just invent stuff out of thin air that is so preposterous. And we've spoken about the effect of a big lie and why it's so important to them to make the lie so big, but it's so dangerous when you try to balance those two things. When you try
and here's
to balance
the thing, Brett, they're
reality with
coming
bullshit.
for you. You're not safe no matter where you are. Like, this is the thing too with the kind of country club Republican mentality of like, hey, like, I'm too busy to answer the emails. I'm at the country club. I'm, like the Mitch McConnell, and by the way, Mitch McConnell is very extreme, but who's that guy too, who's now going to become they're trying to make him like the president of Florida University.
We've talked about him nonstop.
Sass.
Ben Sass.
Ben Sass. I mean, it doesn't, unless you are an extremist, like looking shaman, like you gotta be out there. We interviewed too. We're gonna play this interview, not here on this podcast, but we did an interview with the Democratic candidate running for Washington's 3rd congressional, Washington State's 3rd congressional district. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, I think is her name. Yeah, yes. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. And people said, you got to interview her. She's running against this guy, Joe Kent, who's like literally every position, he takes it to the most extreme. Like, to be currently in a MAGA. Brett, do we have this video? I know I wasn't gonna, was gonna talk about it, but do we have the ability to play the video that Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, who's running as the Democrat in Washington's 3rd, called Joe's Greatest Hits? Like, this is how you have to run now if you are going to be a Republican candidate for Congress. You have that, Brett?
I could pull it up if you give me like 30 seconds. I
Right,
got
I
it.
I'll
could
give you the
definitely
30
filibuster because I could talk about the opponent that much more. Her opponent refuses to acknowledge that police officers died the day of the insurrection. Her opponent calls these insurrectionists political prisoners. I don't want to give too much away.
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it. When I saw this video, that's why, Brett, I'm sorry to ruin our flow, but like when I saw this ad that that Marie Gluesenkamp Perez did on this guy, I was like, I got to interview Marie Gluesenkamp Perez because this is some wild stuff. Here, play this. This is Joe Kent, who is running as the MAGA handpicked candidate in Washington's 3rd Congressional.
I have my issues with the way the last election went. It was stolen. It was rigged. We are in a war with the left. We are in a war with the establishment, too.
The national security state has been weaponized against us at the behest of the progressive left and the globalists.
Its connections to right-wing extremists, including a member of the Proud Boys, recorded white nationalists.
I don't think there's anything wrong with there being a, white people, special interest group.
The blame for what happened on January 6th, none of this is on President Trump.
I mean, it reeks of an absolute intelligence operation.
I 100% support Roe versus Wade being overturned. I would move to have a national ban on abortion. Privatize a high-interest, tax-free savings plan that's managed on the private sector on Wall Street is a much better option for Social Security.
The folks in Congress right now, like Matt Gaetz, I think has been absolutely unapologetic. Marjorie Taylor Greene's another one. She's a great fighter.
We have to realize that we're bringing the national security state to heel must be our top priority. We're going to go after AG Garland, impeaching Joe Biden. We're in very dangerous waters right now, unprecedented. We've never been here before.
This
and
guy
Joe Kent was handpicked by Trump to run because there was a Republican who was in Washington 3rd. It's a very moderate district, Washington State's 3rd Congressional District. And the individual who was the congresswoman there, she had called out Donald Trump and she had voted for his impeachment. So then they got Joe Kent in there, who's like the most extremist. But Brett, talk about Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, and first I'll just say we're going to have our interview with Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. That's going to be out. We're actually going to release it over the weekend this Saturday because we got midterms coming up. We can't take days off right now. So you could hear that interview this Saturday, and we'll also have the video dropping on Saturday as well. So let's talk about Mitch McConnell. As everybody knows, Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell have been in this feud. Honestly, it's very much Mitch McConnell's fault. He could have ended this issue by rallying people to impeach Trump during both impeachments, but especially the second impeachment, and he chose not to. And so now he is left with Donald Trump being on him every single day. And so Donald Trump went on one of these like MAGA radio show. I don't, every time I see some of these clips, it's just funny also that Donald Trump is no longer invited on any like the mainstream, networks.
No, because they're too scared that he'll get them sued.
Like Fox really doesn't have him on.
He's
anymore.
a liability.
He really is. So he's on this MAGA dude, John Frederick show, and he takes that opportunity to attack Mitch McConnell like 3 days before the midterm election. And he says that that Republicans should impeach Mitch McConnell. Donald Trump accused McConnell of working with the Democrats to blow up the debt ceiling because they, quote, have something on him. Trump didn't really say exactly what that meant. I have no idea what any of that means. I mean, it's a little scary that Donald Trump was president of the United States for a lot of reasons, but it's also scary that he was president of the United States and does not know that you cannot impeach a senator. That's not something that even happens. But when Trump is doing all of these things, though, I think he is really just rallying his supporters, rallying his violent mob to get them angry and get them on the attack, and also to have somebody to blame and be angry when things don't work out their way. Let's play this clip of Trump talking about Mitch McConnell on this radio show.
The Democrats are scheming, probably with some of the rhinos, in order to blow the debt ceiling up. What is your position on that?
It's crazy what's happening with this debt ceiling. Mitch McConnell keeps allowing you to have it. I mean, they ought to impeach Mitch McConnell if he allows that. Frankly, Mitch McConnell, something has to be. They have something on him. How he approves this thing is incredible.
I don't even know what he's talking about, but we've already heard that the Republican plan, and this is something that Kevin McCarthy has said, what they want to do if they get a hold of the Congress is they want to basically hold our government hostage in order to cut social programs like Social Security and like Medicare. They, want to refuse to raise the debt ceiling, and they want our government to default on its debts, which would lower our credit rating. It would be absolutely devastating for the economy, and they want to hold that up. They want to basically extort and blackmail the American people and the Democrats and say, if you don't do this, if you don't make cuts to Social Security or eliminate Social Security or eliminate Medicare or take away the CHIPS Act, they're going to attack all the accomplishments of the Biden administration. Then we are going to have our government default. That's what they plan to do. Like, the thing that people need to realize is that Republicans, if they were to win, and we're not going to let them win, if they were to win, their plan is not to fix things. Their plan is going to be to make things as bad as possible so they could then blame it on the Democrats and then try to ride that wave into a 2024 win. I thought Bill Clinton, but he had a point to that effect the other day when he was on the campaign trail, saying that is the general, Republican strategy. And it was kind of the rant that I went on the other day as well. But that's why it's good to see President Biden out there, calling this what it is, actually calling out this political violence. And it was honestly just really great to see him lay out the stakes of this. I thought he did it in a really bipartisan way. I thought it was very presidential. He called, what is it, Jordy?
Wait, but before we move on, I just want to, because words matter, and I think I want to clarify this at least on my end. And I'm not sticking up for Mitch McConnell. I don't think him and Trump have a feud, because that would make it so two people are fighting. Trump is just bullying Mitch McConnell at this point because Mitch McConnell isn't standing up to Trump and calling him crazy and doing the things that he can do with his power to stop the nonsense. So I wouldn't call it a feud. I would just say Trump's bullying McConnell.
I think McConnell's a guy who sort of plays in the shadows, right? I think he's a sort of guy who will take the punches in public and will do what he can in the background of things to say F you to Trump. I kind of think that's how he operates, just kind of, generally. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is an incredible threat to the country. These Republicans are an incredible threat to the country because they've really abandoned the principles that our country was founded on. They've really abandoned the whole notion that we are a democracy. You now hear a constant refrain, we're not a democracy. What are you talking about? Democracy is bad. We're a constitutional republic. I mean, that's like saying it's not a sandwich, it's a hoagie. It's like, all right, calm down. It's not a sandwich, it's a roast beef sandwich. Okay, it's a type of sandwich, though. And you have these Republicans that are really now, they're highlighting political violence as a means to their ends. They're being, incredibly violent. They're riling up their people. And the second their people actually go, it's this idea of stochastic terrorism. But once this person builds themselves up, thinks of themselves as a hero, and then actually goes and commits the act of violence that they were told to do, what do these MAGAs do? They are cowards. They go, oh, he wasn't one of us. That was Antifa. That was this. That was that. They never are able to actually take responsibility. And I always have to imagine, like, it's hard to find levity in any of these horrific moments. But could you imagine let's think like the guy who attacked Paul Pelosi and thought he was doing this as like, I'm the MAGA guy. I'm going to do this for my brothers in MAGA. And he goes, and then the way they turn on him and smear him, it's like the Ray Epps thing. The Ray Epps guy who was out the night before saying we're going to storm the Capitol on January 6th. And the whole right-wing ecosystem ended up going, he's an FBI agent. That guy's a fraud. It's like, dude, he's one of you, man. Like, all these people just get thrown under the bus by them every single time. But a couple of lines that I want to talk about from President Biden quickly. The speech that he gave last night, which I thought was incredible, it was held at Union Station in Washington, D.C., just blocks from the U.S. Capitol, where, of course, the insurrectionists tried to attack and tried to stop the certification of the 2020 election. And in no uncertain terms, Biden said, we cannot take democracy for granted any longer. And I think he really spoke to the fears that people have of this democracy. I mean, I think people are looking at the polls. People are very concerned. I know everybody who I speak to is very concerned about the fate of our country, kind of above almost everything else. And Biden said there's something else at stake here. Our democracy itself is at stake. And he called out Donald Trump too. He said, American democracy is under attack because the defeated former president, I love when he breaks that out, refused to accept the results of the 2020 election. He refuses to accept the will of the people. He refuses to accept the fact that he lost. He's abused his power. And, the reaction from the right was as expected. They go, oh, divisive. Oh, how could you? But if you really listen to the words of that speech as an honest, genuine, objective observer, you could come to no other conclusion that was a speech about what makes America America. And as we've said before, the reactions to these speeches when President Biden condemns autocracy and condemns fascism, the people that are the loudest and the people that are first to complain about those speeches are really at the end of the day telling on themselves. Because if somebody says, you know what, we want to prevent fascism and autocracy in this country, and you go, stop talking about me like that, you told on yourself. As the great DJ Khaled said, you played yourself.
Nice. Okay, Ari Melbourne.
Right.
George.
Benjamin.
I'm with you, Brett. And just tell us about the early voting numbers, because I got Jim Clyburn ready to go.
All right, let's go into the early voting numbers quickly, and we'll get to Jim Clyburn. The data is really good, guys. The data is really, really, really good now. And we don't say this to instill false hope, and we don't say this to lull anybody in complacency. We say this to make sure that we stay on track here and that we continue to get out there and continue to vote. This should not slow a single person down. I wanted to motivate you to further get out there and to know that we can win this. Here's their early vote update. And this comes from Simon Rosenberg, who's been checking out the data from Target Early. And once again, after this show, go check out on our YouTube or our podcast. You can listen to our interview with Simon Rosenberg. So right now, Democrats are leading in the early vote 50-39. And the way the Target Early data works is it doesn't know who people are actually voting for, but it could see who is turning in ballots. Are Democrats turning in ballots? Are Republicans turning in ballots? Are unaffiliateds turning in ballots? At this moment in time, the Democrats hold a 3.2 million national vote lead. And states that have a Democratic share above the 2020 share, there are a lot of them and a lot of important states. And here is it by net increase. Okay. Michigan has a 22-point net increase over the Democratic share from 2020. New Jersey, 15 points. Wisconsin, 14 points. Georgia, 12. Pennsylvania, 12. Iowa, 10. Indiana, 10. Ohio, 9. Virginia, 8. Minnesota, 7. Texas, 6. And it goes on and on from there. That's all great news. Democrats now have a bigger lead in the early and mail voting in North Carolina than they did at this point in 2020. Young Democrats in Georgia have cast over 10,000 more ballots than they had at this point in 2018. Though young voter turnout is lagging slightly in some states, like in Texas, it's lagging a little bit. And people are attributing that to the SB1 law, which passed because that actually outlawed 24-hour voting, early voting, late voting. And so think about if you're a student and if you have a job, if you're working all day, if you're in class all day, they have prevented people from going to the polls at those off hours that they used to be able to go to the polls to. So that's an example of voter suppression at work right there. But we're also seeing these great videos, though. They've also, by the way, they've closed a lot of the polls at college campuses in Texas, which is super messed up. But the places where the polls are open, I mean, we are seeing such good signs out there. I'm going to play this video for the people watching. And this is a video of a line of voters at, I believe this is UT Austin, waiting to vote early. And the line just goes on and on and on. That's what I like to see, people.
You know what, though? I like to see it, Brett, but it is so absurd when it is actually so easy to vote.
So
but what
true.
you're watching
So
there is exactly what they're trying to make students to do in Texas. Because if you actually let those students vote and say probably more than like one machine or two machines that they all have to wait in a line for, and you actually just opened it up to let the people freaking vote, let the people freaking vote. Okay, like
it's crazy.
How could you be like, and that's the thing too. Like when your position is not letting people vote, You are the most cowardly, freaking anti-democratic, anti-democracy, small d democratic. It is absurd. And yes, Brett, that is a great sign, that video that you just showed, but that is an absurd thing that in the United States of America, we are forcing people to wait on a line. Because I bet you there are tons of people who look at that and go, I don't want to wait on that line, and then they go, no, you've got to go on that line. It's beyond absurd that exists, that we don't come up with ways between e-voting, which exists in other countries. And like, there's so many other ways to vote, and Republicans want that process. It boils my blood. Anything else you want to say there, Brett? Because I want to bring in Jim Clyburn if you got any more updates.
Now, I want to say, first, you have all these BS Republican complaints that go, it's ridiculous that so many of these states can't get the vote to us the night of the election. Meanwhile, Republicans are the ones who refuse to pass laws that allow vote counters to start counting votes as they receive the votes and force them to wait until the polls close.
Yeah.
So this is an example of Republicans creating a problem, then using that problem to spread disinformation and spread propaganda and to inject further doubt in our elections. And you see a lot of big voice in the Republican Party starting to spread this disinformation about we need they're sort of doing a stop the count kind of thing right now. And I think that shows to me a little bit of a sign of panic coming from their side. And what we have to hope right now is that with this giant difference right now that we are making in the early vote, we have to hope that we dig such a hole that Republicans cannot come out of it on the day. And we didn't make sure that people continue to show up. And as Simon Rosenberg told us, the more people who early vote, it makes it easier for other people to then vote later on. It actually increases turnout overall because it actually allows people, the Democratic Party, groups, campaigns, to then target those lower propensity voters and get them out to the polls, which increases turnout. And so what we got to hope right now is that we are building a tidal wave. We are building a blue wave. And that what we are not seeing right now is that moment like before a tsunami when like the ocean gets pulled out and you're like, look at all this land, where did all the water go? And then you get slammed. We want to make sure that that's not what's going to happen to us on the Republican side. And the way we defeat that is by making sure we show up early, vote early, and everybody who listens to this podcast, just text like 5 friends and tell them to get to the polls wherever you are. It's so important everywhere. Now I'm really excited to get into our interview with the House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn.
Wait. Before getting into the champion of democracy, Jim Clyburn, I want to remind everybody that if you support independent media like this, you need to check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. That's patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We are not funded by any outside investors at all. So none of the billionaire and millionaire outside investors who fund the both side-ism media and the pro-fascist media. We are purely fueled by democracy and powered by your generosity. So when you ask, 'cause I get all the emails and the DMs, Ben, what can I do to help? No matter where you are in the world. That's what I'm asking you to do. If you can help us out by going to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, there are a number of different memberships that you can join that has exclusive content, exclusive podcasts, exclusive Q&A sessions there, exclusive merch. There's a tier where you could become an honorary producer of the Meidas Touch podcast. Your name will appear and you will get a poster commemorating being an honorary producer. For those watching
keeps growing
right now, you see the names. It keeps on growing. We are almost at 2,000 patrons, which was our goal by the end of November. Let's hit that goal right now. And by joining patreon.com/MeidasTouch, please, if you can help wherever you are in the world, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Jordy is showing, for those who are listening, but those who are watching, seeing it, the I Read Banned Books shirt, which you can get exclusively at the Meidas Touch store at store.meidastouch.com. The best pro-democracy gear. We got the shirt that Jordy's wearing. We've got Convict or Convict 45 shirts. We've got a number of other great shirts like Person, Woman, Man, Camera, Prison. A great day to buy that. Rowvember and row your votes for those shirts. We have a 30% off flash sale for just the Rowvember and row your vote shirt. So go and get that now at store.midastouch.com. And now let's bring in our interview with the legendary pro-democracy champion, Jim Clyburn. Welcome back to the Midas Touch podcast. We are joined by Congressman Jim Clyburn, representing South Carolina's 6th congressional district. Congressman Clyburn, of course, is the majority whip and the 3rd ranking Democrat in the United States House of Representatives. Welcome to the Midas Touch podcast, Congressman.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Congressman, you're back in South Carolina after traveling to 7 different states over the last 13 days to support Democratic congressional candidates. What is your takeaway about how people are feeling about the midterms after your travels?
Well, I feel much better after this trip than I did before the trip. And I'm hopeful that I can feel a little bit better after the results come in next week. I don't know that we're exactly where we need to be yet. We're in a much better place today than we were a few days ago. And hopefully we'll be in an even better place next week. Upbeat, cautiously optimistic that we can hold on to the House and gain the Senate. Now, the reason I always say gain the Senate, because people keep saying that we're in charge of the Senate. We can organize the Senate because we can break a tie on the floor with the vice president. In the committees, a tie vote will not prevail. Mm-hmm. And so we are really in charge of the floor, but not the committee. And most committee work, or most work in the Senate is done in the committees. And what we need is a definitive 51, 52 votes in the Senate before we can be in charge.
So when you're out there and you're speaking to voters, what are the kind of top issues that come to mind that people are speaking to you about right now?
Well, believe it or not, people may talk about their personal issues. Some may be talking about Roe v. Wade and the overturning Roe v. Wade. A lot of people are talking about the economy, whether or not inflation is out of hand. But everybody is talking about this democracy. I'm amazed at the number of people who really feel that none of this is going to matter if we lose the country. And for us to think that we can't lose the country, I'll just ask you to be informed by history. I don't know that anybody in Germany felt that when they elected Adolf Hitler to be their chancellor, that within years they would have a dictator. They allowed Hitler to discredit the press, allowed him to co-opt religious institutions. Next thing we knew, Germany was gone. This 45 took that playbook, and that's what's going on today. And I don't understand why people can't see that.
Well, I think, as you say, Congressman, the people who are speaking to you see that. One of the questions that I always have is, why doesn't the press see that? And why is the media often just having these discussions like you have two normal political parties who just take different sides of the issue, where, and I want to get your take on this, I feel like we only have one major political party, and that's the Democratic Party that supports democracy today. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely correct. And more people are now saying that. And you're right. At the beginning, you would hear people say all the time, well, it's on both sides. It's not on both sides. The fact of the matter is, that's why you see Liz Cheney out there supporting a Democrat today, another Democrat on yesterday or the day before, because she knows that it is the Democratic Party that is going to save this democracy if it is saved. The Republican Party has given over all of its independence to one person. That is an autocracy. They are giving everything to one person. They are not doing anything in a collective fashion. And Liz Cheney sees that, she understands that, and that's where we are. And we had better be careful. When I look back at my parents, who were Republicans, they were members of the party of Lincoln. When I went off to college, I thought I was, but I wasn't there long. I graduated high school in 1957. It was in 1957 that Strom Thurmond started out his record-setting filibuster. It was against the 1957 Civil Rights Act, which was just a principle. That's when I first started noticing that this was not my father's Republican Party. Now, he at the time was a Democrat, but he left the party over civil rights. He resigned from the Democratic Party and took a lot of other Democrats with him, and they all took over the Republican Party, where my father and other blacks were, and they took the party from there. And they have turned it in to what we see today. It just didn't start with Donald Trump.
Right.
It started a long time before Trump. Go back and look at Dwight Eisenhower. When Dwight Eisenhower was president, his vice president was Richard Nixon. And someone asked Eisenhower one day to give them his impression of what contributions that Richard Nixon had made to his administration. He asked for some time to think about it. Never answered the question. So this started way back then. And then in 1972, Richard Nixon laid out his Southern strategy. Southern strategy meant race baiting. And they have gone downhill ever since. And so I said to my Republican friends, the history is very clear that you guys have taken on something that we thought this country had gotten beyond.
No, and Congressman, you mentioned Strom Thurmond, senator from South Carolina. You're a Congress member from South Carolina, and Strom Thurmond was replaced by Lindsey Graham. And when I grew up and I went to college and I saw Lindsey Graham and McCain, I always viewed, Lindsey Graham as somewhat of a breath of fresh air from a Strom Thurmond. And I thought he was a moderate individual. He's someone who you know well, but it seems every single day he's out there, Lindsey Graham, spreading conspiracies and avoiding speaking about January 6th, a certain speech and debate privilege not to testify about his communications about an insurrection with Trump. And so what do you think about that? I know like a Lindsey Graham, and like what happened, and how do you make sense of that with someone who you know well out there?
It's a very good question, and I do not have a good answer. Like you, I was elated when Lindsey Graham got elected to the United States Senate. Although I got along very well with Strom Thurmond, his sister Gertrude was a very good friend of mine, and we worked together early on in our careers. And Strom always talked about how well his sister thought of me. And that was the basis of our relationship. But I knew Strom Thurmond and his politics from the 1950s. And then Lindsey gets elected to his seat, and I really was anxiously awaiting his service. And we do work together even now. When we were trying to get a Supreme Court justice from South Carolina, we worked very closely together on that. And we have worked closely together on the infrastructure bill that we have. Lindsey voted for that and helped work to put that together. But for some strange reason, he has this dual personality when it comes to politics, and I don't understand it.
And Congressman, I'm going to turn it over to Brett to ask some questions, and we definitely want to hear too about what your thoughts are of 2022 versus 2020. But I have to ask you this one, which you may get asked a lot, but after everything you've heard from the January 6th committee being laid out and all you know, do you believe Donald Trump should be criminally prosecuted for January 6th and election interference?
Yes, I do, but I have not just come to that because of January 6th committee. Though I think you may know, Bennett Thompson is probably my closest friend in the United States Congress. And that happened long before we came to Congress. We knew each other for 20 years before we served together in the Congress. And I think he's done a remarkable job with the January 6th committee. But I often tell people to go back and look at the comments I made back in 2018, just before Donald Trump made his joint speech to the joint committee. A joint session. It was not a State of the State address. The night before, I was on CNN television. We're talking with Don Lemon, and Don Lemon asked me a question that night, and I said to him, I said, look, this guy is not planning to give up this office. Mm-hmm. He is laying the groundwork to install himself. I saw what was happening in this country, and I was able to compare it with the things I'd studied about what went on in Germany. And I told him that. So Don Lemon asked me the question, are you saying that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler? I says, no. Putin is Hitler. Donald Trump is Mussolini. That made headlines in South Carolina, and a lot of people looked at me aghast for having said it. I meant it then, and I think that all the proof is now being unfolded to the American people. In fact, Joe Scarborough on his show, after Donald Trump came out of the Walter Reed Hospital that night, after his battle with COVID-19, went up on the Truman balcony and looked out over with a wave. Joe Scarborough called it a Mussolini stance.
Yeah.
I said it back then, I meant it then. I think he has committed a multitude of crimes. Whether or not the Department of Justice will do what is necessary to bring him to justice, I don't know.
And sir, you were in the room with Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on January 6th during that harrowing footage that was recently released by the January 6th committee. What was it like being there in the heat of the moment? What was going through your mind? Could you take us back to that incident?
It was surreal, literally surreal. I'm sitting there and we're looking at the TV monitor. And I remember Nancy looking over at me and says, can you believe this? I happen to remember that because I saw it on the video. And I remember what I said to her. I said, Nancy, she said something to me about the National Guard. I said, we got to do something about the National Guard. It can't be done by the District of Columbia, because I had already been told by friends of mine who worked with the District of Columbia that their authority with the National Guard had been taken away.
Wow.
And that they did not have the ability to bring out the National Guard. That rested with the White House. That, to me, is an indication that things were being put in place. That's why so many of those insurrectionists could say, these people are on our side. They knew that things had been laid, the foundation had been put in place for them to do things and get away with it. And so I was the one that said to Nancy, call the governor of Virginia. Steny Hoyer got on the phone and called the governor of Maryland. And I said to Nancy, I said, I like Hogan, but I'm not too sure of his bipartisanship here. Call over to the governor of Virginia and see what we can get done over there. So I said that to her, and she did. You may recall in one of those videos, she was on the phone with the governor of Virginia.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I did notice in that video also, and multiple videos, is that alongside you were many of your Republican colleagues. And these same Republican colleagues of yours later went on television and their social media platforms and various podcasts, and they lied about what happened that day, despite being in the room in the heat of the moment, fearing for their lives right alongside you and the speaker and Chuck Schumer. What do you say to those Republican colleagues who were in the heat of the moment with you and then got out there and lied to the American public, and in some cases blamed Speaker Pelosi for the attack?
You're exactly right, Brett. And that to me was one of the most disappointing things I've ever seen. Even when I first heard it, Steve Scalise was one of the people who said it. Steve and I carry on a pretty positive relationship. As you know, our chair, and he's a ranking member on the select subcommittee on the coronavirus, and we have a very good working relationship. But for some strange reason, I think they've made some decision that they've got to politicize everything, no matter what it is. The country's welfare is secondary to their political success. That, to me, is dangerous. Whatever it is, the country must come first. Country must be above policy. Country or people must be above politics. But they seem to decide that irrespective of what the people's needs may be, what the country's problems may be, they got to make it political.
And of course, when we speak about January 6th, we're not just speaking about an incident that occurred in the past. This is not some historic incident. This is something that is active. This is something that Republicans are engaging with right now as far as election interference as to trying to kind of end our future elections. And I saw you recently say, quote, "These midterms are about who gets to vote in the future and the credibility of future elections." Can you elaborate on that point and lay out the stakes of these upcoming midterms?
Oh, sure. The moment the Supreme Court made its decision in the Holder decision, in that case, the Supreme Court took away the protections that have been there since 1965 over the integrity of the vote. Before 1965, I remember my parents not being able to register to vote, both of whom were college students. My father a minister, my mother a businesswoman. Why? Because things like not being able to tell how many jelly beans were in a jar was the kind of things being used. How many bubbles in a bar of soap. These were things that were used in the South to deny people the right to vote. Give me your interpretation or the interpretation to my satisfaction of the Constitution. These things were outlawed, poll taxes, by the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The moment that protection got turned away, these states came up with other innovative ideas, putting in place a committee that will have the right to overturn election results. That's what they did in Georgia and Texas, putting together a law that makes it a criminal act to give somebody a bottle of water, standing in line for 5 or 6 hours waiting to vote. And if you give them a bottle of water, you have committed a criminal act. That's what I mean when I say that. And one of them taking place while standing in line to vote. The other one that I mentioned before takes place when you're sitting at home looking at the results of your vote. And you watch some committee saying, "I'm overturning the results of your vote because I don't like the outcome." That is the kind of stuff of which autocracies are made. That is what I meant.
And with our democracy at such risk right now, and with all the division that we are facing and all the lies that we are seeing from the right, what will it take to actually bring this country back to a place of relative normalcy again?
At least 2 definitive elections. I think that's what it's going to take. I think next Tuesday, the results of next Tuesday will go a long way toward determining whether or not a foundation will be laid for this country to come to its senses. I just don't think it's going to happen otherwise. Why do I feel that way? Because I think that what happened in 1964, when Goldwater contested for the presidency against Lyndon Johnson. Remember what was going on in 1964? You guys are too young to remember, but I was around. In 1964, we had Lyndon Johnson running for president on his own. We had just had the president of the United States of America assassinated in Dallas, Texas. We just had people surrounding that assassination. James Earl Ray, and was that Jack Ruby. Shady characters that nobody ever had been able to figure out exactly what it was. And we still, in the country, not saying everything that needs to be said about that. Some shady stuff took place around that assassination. Lyndon Johnson tried in 1964 to get the Civil Rights Act passed and couldn't get it passed. In order to get that bill passed, he took voting out of it, took housing out of it. 2 critical things. You build wealth quicker but with housing than anything else. And they didn't want us to have fair housing. Didn't want us to have voting. And so Lyndon Johnson went out to the public. He says, I can't get it done. Give me a Congress, a House, and a Senate, and we'll do it next year. He got the House and the Senate that he wanted. And in August the 6th, 1965, he was able to sign the Voting Rights Act. In 1968, we got the Fair Housing Law. In 1972, the Civil Rights Act applied to the private, the public sector as well as the private. That was because we had a definitive election in 64. That is what it's going to take, a definitive election. If this election is real close either way, we're going to have a problem going forward.
And that's why these elections and all elections are so important. It's not just about the next 2 years, but it is generational change that could occur with every single election. And you understand that every time. We just saw you out on the campaign trail recently. And of course, in 2020, you famously endorsed President Biden at a pivotal moment before the South Carolina primaries. Reflecting back at that endorsement, has President Biden met the expectations of your endorsement?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of my most valuable advisors, political advisors, my late wife, said to me, May of 2020, no, I'm sorry, May of, 2020, 2019, May of 2019, just before she passed away, she said to me, if we want to win this election, we'd better nominate Joe Biden. Now, Emily was a medical librarian at the VA hospital here in Columbia. She used to go through all those wards talking to people. She could tell me who was going to win every election. And she did. She never missed an election, even my own. When I ran for Secretary of State, she told me that she thought I was running a good campaign and I should keep running a good campaign. But she said, get prepared, because you're not going to win. Run good, but you're not going to win. And of course, I lost. So when she will say that to her own husband, and then she said, if we want to win this election, we better nominate Joe Biden. So that was behind all of that. Okay. Now, a lot of things took place between her death in September 2019 to that endorsement in February 2020, but that was behind it. Has he lived up to my expectations? Yes, he has. Because he found a country with people dying in record numbers, being hospitalized all over the place, businesses shuttered, schools closed. He passed the Rescue Act. He signed that bill 6 weeks after he became president. Schools reopened, businesses reopened. People went back to work, got cash in people's pockets, and got shots in people's arms. He did what was necessary to get things back on track. And then we passed the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we had the biggest infrastructure investment that we had in this country since Dwight Eisenhower Interstate Highway. That's a fact. Go back and check. And then we went on to do the so-called CHIPS and Science Act, Inflation Reduction Act, the PAC Act, the Safer Communities Act. You get into all of that and you say, when have we had anything like that? You got to go back to 1965. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society is the first time you find anything like what this man has done when you look at history. And it's all wedded together. Remember now, in 1965, you got Medicaid and Medicare. It's in this bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, is when we finally got the ability for Medicare to negotiate for the price of drugs, for the cost of drugs. We finally got the ability to put a cap on insulin. Emily lost a battle, a 30-year battle with diabetes when she passed away. I saw her insulin bill, sometimes $800 a month for insulin, for a medicine that's been around for 100 years. This country got access to the patent for $1. The guy who came up with insulin did not want to make a profit off people's misery. He sold the patent for $1. And then we give the ability to these drug companies to sell it for whatever they want to. We took that away. At least now, for people on Medicare, when the bill passed the House, we did it for everybody. That's why this election is important, because we need to do that for everybody. Children are being born with diabetes every day. Why? Joe Biden had the vision to let us out. We didn't just take care with the PAC Act of the soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. We went back and picked up those soldiers who didn't get everything they need from Vietnam. Agent Orange. A lot of people got 30, 40, and 50% disability when they should have been getting 80, 90, and 100. And I know it's working because I got stopped in Des Moines, Iowa the other day, coming out of a church. A man reached out and grabbed me by the arm. He says, I came out of Vietnam with Agent Orange. It's caused a leukemia that I just got diagnosed with. I never got more than 50%. I went last week. They gave me 100%. Thank you. The PAC Act is working. So Joe Biden has made it. So no, I'm very happy with what he has done. But you know who's not happy? Those people who want pharmaceutical companies to continue charging anything they want to charge. That's why they want to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. That's why they want to repeal stuff in the so-called rescue plan. They have decided that if they get the chance, they are going to means test Medicare. Means that no matter how much money you spend into Medicare, yeah, you've been paying for it since you were 16 years old. You're now over 65. But unless your income dictates, no matter how much money you put into it, you may not get it back. Same thing for Social Security. They want to privatize Social Security, turn it over to the stock market so the people who've been funding these campaigns, all of this dark money, it'll come to light if they get a chance, because they are going to give the Social Security money to these people to speculate on Wall Street. That's what they want to do when they say they want to sunset Social Security. That's what's at stake here. So people who are looking forward to Social Security retirement, who are looking forward to Medicare that they've been paying for since they were 14, 15, and 16 years old, they better vote like it.
And Congressman, before we head out, any final words to voters? I think you summed it up nicely there, but any final words to people watching this?
I would say this democracy is worth saving. Elected de Tocqueville told us way back when he came to this country and observed what this democracy is all about. He said, America is not great because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because she has always been able to repair her faults. We have faults in our system. COVID-19 revealed some of them. We see the mistake this country made in the election of 2016 reveals some faults. We must demonstrate our greatness by repairing those faults. And the way to do that is to give this Congress, this president, the votes that they need in order to continue our pursuit of a more perfect union. It'll never be perfect, but we should always be in pursuit of perfection, not give up on it and turn to an autocracy, because that is where this democracy will die.
Congressman Jim Clyburn, a true honor to have you on the Midas Touch podcast. We appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
There you have it. Jim Clyburn, the House Majority Whip on the Midas Touch podcast, breaking it down, showing what is really at stake here, bro.
Amazing. I mean, Clyburn he's the kind of guy that when he speaks, you can't help but just listen to and hang on every single word. Truly an honor to have House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn on the show and take his words seriously as we head into these final days before election. Our democracy is at stake here. It is so important that everybody gets out to vote. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to have an episode with Marie Glusenkamp Perez that comes out on Saturday. So be sure to check our podcast feed for that on Saturday. It's going to be on our YouTube as well. Got an episode coming for you Monday, our last podcast before election day. So you know it's going to be a good one. And as we head into this weekend, this is the weekend where we got to hit the ground running. There's no relaxing this weekend, people.
Home stretch.
Let's do this. Let's make it happen.
And this is, as we always say, the Midas Mighty is an active community. So after you watch this, you don't just go on to the next podcast or the next. Now is when you put in the work. So whoever it is that you know who hasn't voted yet, be it a friend, a neighbor, a family member, a colleague, coworker, whoever who you think can vote blue, please do your part right now. With the numbers of people who watch this podcast, if you just got 2, 5, 10, 15, we're talking about millions and millions of people. You know, one of the things I saw, Brett, you know, if you saw that Fox was getting rid of, I think it was Shepard Smith or whatever, or was demoting him or something. And I looked at his numbers and I was like, we do better numbers here than he does at Fox, you know? And so if our community here gets involved and actually spreads this message, we could be the decision maker. We could be the deciding factor. We could be the X factor that really changes the game. And so everybody, please do what you can to get out people to vote. We would so appreciate that. And also, if you like independent media like this, please go to our Patreon site and become a member of our Patreon site at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. You spell that patreon.com/MeidasTouch, MEIDASTOUCH. We are not funded by any outside investors. And so all of those big media companies, they've got millionaire and billionaire investors who fund those operations, the pro-fascist media, the both sidisms. We do better numbers than them because this is a community of people who love our democracy, but we are purely fueled by you. And so we would so appreciate your generosity in becoming a member at one of the tiers at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There's great exclusive content, exclusive merch drops there, behind the scenes footage, Q&A sessions with me and my brothers. There's a tier where you could become an honorary producer and your name appears at the end of the podcast. You get postcards and posters. There's so much great stuff there, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. So whenever you ask, wherever you are in the world, and I get asked, hey, we want to help grow this, what can I do? That's really what you can do. So when this podcast is over, please head to patreon.com/MeidasTouch and become a member.
We're so close to 2,000 patrons.
So close to 2,000. I think we could hit it. I think we can hit it tonight, but we'll see. Also, for the best unapologetically pro-democracy gear, and to be honest, I'm not sure we have that much competition of unapologetically pro-democracy gear, but we probably have the best political gear out there, period. Go to store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com. Jordy is displaying the I Read Banned Books sweater right now, or sweatshirt. You can get that. You can get the Convict or Convict 45 t-shirts. You can get a bunch of other shirts as well, including the Row-Vember and Row Your Vote shirts, and a bunch of other stuff. Store.MeidasTouch.com. And also, please subscribe now to this YouTube channel if you're not subscribed. If you are listening on audio, go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe there. For our YouTube listeners, please subscribe wherever you get the audio as well. We've got a very vibrant, just purely audio community as well, who listens to us while they go for walks or in the car or in the kitchen or in the house or just walking around or whatever hobby, whatever you do. But listen to it on both. I think you get a different perspective when you just listen to it on the audio versus the video. But subscribe on both now. We would so appreciate that. And leave a 5-star review, will you, on the audio. And that goes a long way. So write a 5-star review and leave a 5-star review wherever you get your audio podcast. So appreciate everybody for watching this episode of the Meidas Touch podcast. Special thanks to our guest, Jim Clyburn. Don't forget to check out patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Brett and Jordy, great spending time with you. Oh, and most importantly, make sure to vote. Make sure you get others to vote. And Jordy, take it away.
Shout out to the Meidas Mighty. At Meidas Touch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.